Hello friends, I'm Narendra Verma once again before you. As you know very well, in business studies for class 12 CBSE syllabus, we have been dealing with the chapter number 5, that is organizing, right? And today's session, what we are going to learn: meaning and definition of decentralization, difference between centralization and decentralization, and difference between delegation and decentralization, and at last, importance of decentralization, right? So without wasting much time, let's start. So, decentralization. Let me tell you one thing: decision making is the very much important function or activity, or you better call it a process of management, right? In every organization, decision making is the most important one, because success and failure of an organization depends only on the decisions. Okay, and one more thing we'll have to remember while keeping this point, that decisions are important, good decisions should be taken, and the good decision should be taken within proper time, right? Okay, so for taking decision, every organization has its own process, own system, like they can have any kind of system. Okay, but right now we're talking about decentralization. Under this, what happens if an organization shares this decision making power with its other departmental heads and all levels of management? Okay, or we can say when the power to take decision is distributed at various levels of hierarchical structure. Okay, so that is known as decentralization. Alright, it is a kind of top level management policy. Okay, it is not necessary or mandatory to follow, but it is the optional one. The organizations which increase in size, okay, they need to follow decentralization. Why? Because it becomes impossible for them to be centralized and to take all the decisions on their own. On their own means the top level management. Okay, it's not possible for a big organization to take all the decisions at top level, right? They'll have to distribute some decision making power at various levels of management, whether it is middle level or lower level, but they'll have to distribute the decision making power. Only then the proper functioning of the organization can be ascertained, right? So in that way, we can say that decentralization places the decision making power to the nearest point of action. Okay, it's not like that if at lower level one person is to take decision, that is irrelevant for the top level management. Even then he needs consultants from the top level management. Okay, if he waits for that much time, then what happens? Sometimes the opportunities are missed. Okay, so that is why decentralization is exercised. Okay, it involves delegation of authority at various levels of management. Understood the point? So in short, we can say that it pushes the decision making command downside the chain. Okay, means the highest decision making power is there with the top level management, but now they are sharing some power with other lower or middle level management as well, right? Okay, now with the help of the information I have just shared with you, we can frame the definition of decentralization. I just write it down here. So, decentralization refers to systematic delegation of authority. Okay, systematic means when we name something systematic, means it has various steps to follow, right? Okay, it is a kind of process. Fine. Okay, so systematic delegation of authority. Okay, we can see here that decentralization includes delegation as well. Okay, but what is the difference? We need to understand here. Okay, through all the levels of management and in all the departments. Okay, see, when we learned about the delegation, then we saw that the delegation of authority meant just sharing the authority with immediate subordinates. Okay, it was a kind of sharing the workload. Okay, and just for that some responsibility is transferred and some authority is also transferred. Okay, it's not like that a superior has permanently delegated some decision making power or authority to his subordinate. Okay, or it also did not mean that the superior has given the power, okay, to all levels of management, right? The scope of delegation is limited. Okay, that is limited to only immediate subordinate, and that is the temporary one. For particular task, it keeps on changing. Okay, but it is a kind of policy decision, decentralization one, right? It is the permanent one. Okay, when once the authorities are fixed, okay, at various levels of management, then these are there forever until unless big changes planned by the company. Understood the point? Okay, I just explain you something through the diagram so that you can understand that where delegation is and where decentralization is. If I say that decentralization includes delegation also, that is very much correct. Or I can say that decentralization is the extension of delegation of authority. How? I just showed you. So have a look here. See, this is CEO. He is there at top level. Now production head and finance head, these both are there at middle level, and supervisor 1, supervisor 2 or assistant 1, assistant 2, these are there at lower level. Okay. Now if this superior shares his workload for a temporary period with this person only, okay, then this is the scope of delegation. Understood? Okay, this is delegation. He has shared his some workload related to some particular task, and for the same he has transferred him some responsibility, some authority, okay, and accountability is also created for the same. Understood? Okay, now we can compare that this is limited to this only. It is not going even to this another middle level management. Understood the point? Okay, this is what the delegation. Now let's talk about the decentralization. For decentralization, what happened? Some powers already are given to him permanently. Some powers already are given to him to take decision. Some powers are given to him. Some powers are given to him. Similarly, some powers are given to him. Some powers are given to him. Okay, so now this overall structure in which distribution of power has taken place at various levels of management, be it middle or lower, this is known as decentralization. Understood the point? That is why I was saying to you that decentralization includes delegation also. Or we can say from the other aspect, decentralization is the extension of the delegation of authority. Understood the point? Now let's move ahead with the definition. So decentralization refers to systematic delegation of authority through all the levels of management and in all the departments. Understood? Except which can be exercised only at central points. Okay, there are only crucial and very few decisions are kept which can be taken and exercised only by top level management. Understood? So leaving those, okay, which are those decisions? Like decisions related to expansion, diversification, modification, upgradation. Okay, so this is all kinds of decisions, okay, related to those the power lies in the hand of top level management, and just to run the normal process, the distribution of power has been done. Okay, this production manager is responsible for producing the material. For that, he has authority to decide the quality. Okay, he has authority to decide from whom he has to take the raw material or not. Okay, he has all the rights. Okay, so that is known as power. That is known as distribution of power. Understood the point? Okay, so once again I read the definition of decentralization. Decentralization refers to systematic delegation of authority through all the levels of management and in all the departments except which can be exercised only at central point. Okay, already I had told you one information about decentralization, that decentralization is needed most where the size of the organization increases. Okay, whenever any organization is going to expand itself, then definitely the workload is going to increase. The top level management will not be able to take all the decisions on his own. He has to share the decision making power at various levels of management so that the organization may function pretty well. Understood the point? Okay, always keep this in your mind. But on the contrary, you will have to remember one more thing, that is what the preference of top management. If they want to apply this policy in their management, that is okay. If they do not want to apply, that is also okay. But sooner or later they'll have to apply. Fine. So this is a kind of choice. We cannot say that it is must, but it is expected, it is necessary. We can say that. Fine. And already I have told you that this is the extension of delegation of authority. Okay, later on we'll compare it properly with delegation. We'll come to know what are the differences. Okay. Right now, when the decentralization term comes, then another term has to be discussed, that is centralization. Okay, so let's have some discussion about centralization and decentralization. So very first, let's talk about centralization. Okay, already we have learnt about it in chapter 2 in principles of management. It was one of the principles of Henry Fayol as well. Centralization and decentralization, we learned the definition of those two there as well. Right, once again I would like to remind you here. Okay, centralization means when the power of decision making lies in the hand of only top level management. Okay, for every decision, the lower and middle level management have to contact to top level management. They'll have to wait. Okay, and when the decision is taken, only then they can perform the activities, they can start functioning. Okay, until unless the order is given, decision is taken, approval is given, they cannot decide anything on their own because they do not have the authority to do so. Okay, but in decentralization, what happens? The decision making power is distributed at various levels, means all the powers are not given, but a few powers which are necessary at that particular level are distributed. Okay, if you imagine in a circle, fine. So centralization hints towards like this. Everything is being centered, and who is there at center? Top level management. Okay, but in decentralization, what happens? The power goes outside. It gets distributed. Okay, and who is there here? Middle level managers. Okay, or after that, lower level managers. Understood the point? Okay, so this is centralization and this is decentralization. Here in this diagram also you can understand. Okay, when all the powers are taken by the top level management, they'll have to go again to him for everything. That is centralization. And the opposite is that they need not go to him all the time, except the crucial decision ones. They themselves take the decision. Okay, that is known as decentralization. Understood? Both the terms centralization and decentralization refer to the extent to which authority of decision making is passed to lower levels. Understood? Okay, like I have already explained you, if all the powers means everything, okay, is there in the hand of top level management, that is centralization. And when all the powers are distributed, that is known as decentralization. Now, let's understand the most important point here. When we say centralization or when we say decentralization, okay, then it may mean in two aspects. Okay, when we say centralization, it may mean complete centralization or centralization up to some extent. So, similarly for the decentralization. So, let me tell you one most important thing. For every organization, complete centralization and complete decentralization is not suggested at all. Understood? There has to be a proper balance between that, right? Means a few power have to be there in the hands of top level management, okay, and a few power need to be distributed at various levels of management. Okay, only then the organization can perform better. Okay, complete centralization can be there only in one-man business. Fine, but whenever the size of his business increases, he needs other subordinates, then at the very point decentralization takes place, because he has to transfer some decision making power to his subordinate. Only then he can run the organization pretty well. Understood the point? Okay. Similarly, complete decentralization cannot exist in the organization. Why? Because complete decentralization means just removing the role of this top level management. Okay, that can happen only in the situation when top level management surrenders his all authority. He does not exist anymore. Can it happen in the organization? Not at all. Okay, so that is why complete centralization and complete decentralization is not suggested in big organization. Okay, in small organization like in which only single person is the owner, he is running the organization and he does not need any subordinate, he is all alone, then centralization is successful. Otherwise, in no organization complete centralization or complete decentralization is suggested. Okay, in every organization a proper balance has to be there. Some power have to be there centralized and some need to be decentralized. Understood the point? So that is what the relationship we need to understand. Okay, and why it is said that? Because this is one of the principles of management. If you really want your organizations to achieve all the set objectives in the proper manner, in most effective manner, then Henry Fayol advocated this principle. Okay, so that is why it is applied. Understood? Now, let's compare these 2 points at some basis. Okay, or we can name it difference between centralization and decentralization. So, very first I write down all the bases, then we'll have discussion about it, right? So, the very first basis is meaning. Already we have discussed it a lot. Once again, I'll just write down here, right? Concentration of authority at top level. Okay, but here systematic distribution of authority at various levels. Okay, already we have discussed that. Delegation of authority. Here, when all the powers are taken by top level management, he does not delegate any authority. Okay, so no delegation. But here, definitely delegation exists. Delegation of authority at lower levels. Okay, suitability. Already we have discussed it is suitable for one-man business or small business. Okay, so I just write down here it is suitable for small organizations, and decentralization is suited for large organizations. Understood? Another, freedom of decision making. We see this point from the point of view of middle and lower level management. Okay, so from their point of view we see in centralization they do not have any kind of freedom. Okay, so no freedom. Okay, no freedom of decision making at middle and lower level management. Okay, but here they enjoy freedom. Okay, so freedom of decision making is enjoyed by middle and lower level management. Understood the point? So that is about the centralization and decentralization. Sometimes in the exams the question can come, create difference between centralization and decentralization, how decentralization differs from centralization. Okay, so you can mention these points there, right? Now, let's move on. As we are talking about the differences and comparison, then one more comparison is needed. Okay, decentralization has to be compared with delegation at certain points. Okay, already I have told you the difference between the two, but even then we have discussion about it in detail. We will understand the differences on some basis. Okay, so within short time, let's have discussion about that. So, now let's compare delegation with decentralization on these bases. The very first base is nature. Okay, if we see that delegation is a kind of compulsory act. How it is compulsory? Because whenever the workload of management increases, he has to share his workload with his immediate subordinate. He has no other option. Otherwise, he may miss the chance to focus on the most crucial decisions, which can be taken only by him, right? So it is a kind of compulsory act due to the workload. Okay, but it is a kind of optional policy. Already we have discussed that it depends on the preference of the top level management if they want to exercise these decentralization in their organization or not. Okay, it is necessary, but still it is optional one. Understood? Now let's talk about the second point, freedom of action. Okay, so now let's see this point once again from the point of view of subordinates. Okay, so if we see from the point of view of subordinates here, then they have limited freedom. Why they have limited freedom? Because the superior has given him limited responsibility and authority. Okay, so they can exercise only that. They do not have much freedom. Okay, in comparison to this, in decentralization, the subordinates experience more freedom. Understood? Okay, more freedom to subordinates. Now let's move ahead. Status. If we see according to the status, then what is the status of this? It is a kind of process of sharing tasks, nothing else. Okay, if we see the delegation, it is process of sharing tasks. And here already we have discussed about the policy. Okay, so this is what the result of the policy, and the policy has to be made by the top level management already. Okay, and that is the result of that which we see in actual. Okay, so that is what the status. Now another point, scope. Already we have discussed when delegation is a part of decentralization, it means it has narrow scope. Okay, its scope is narrow. Why? Because it is limited to only one immediate subordinate, not beyond that. But it has wider scope. Why? Because distribution of the authority is there at all levels of management. Understood the point? Now, purpose. Why delegation is done? Just to reduce the workload, just to share the workload. Okay, so its aim is to share workload of superior. Understood? Be focused here. And here if we see what is the aim of this, the aim of it is to enhance the role of subordinates by giving them more autonomy. Autonomy means freedom to exercise the power. Okay, so see the point of view. Here we are seeing it from the point of view superior. Okay, aim is to reduce the or share the workload. But here the aim is to enhance or increase the role of subordinate by giving them more autonomy. So big differences here. Okay, now responsibility. So for delegation, every manager is responsible, right? But for this decentralization, only top management is responsible. Yes, he only decides the policy and exercises the policy. Alright, and here every manager can distribute or share his workload with his immediate subordinate. Understood? Okay, authority. Here the maximum authority remains at top management. Already I explained you when I was discussing the delegation, then the highest authority is there with the top level management, and then it starts reducing. Okay, but here the authority is distributed at various levels. So authority is systematically distributed at every level. Okay, so these were the 7 bases on which we have compared delegation with decentralization. This is again the important question. Okay, sometimes it comes in the examination, so you can write down the basic difference. I have told you that delegation is the part of decentralization, or we can say that decentralization includes delegation as well. Or another statement can be put here that decentralization is the extension of delegation. Okay, and other differences we have understood. The scope of decentralization is wider than that of delegation of authority. Understood the point? Okay. Now let's move on to another portion of today's session, and the last portion, that is importance of decentralization. Why decentralization is important in an organization. Fine. Or we can say that what are the advantages of that. Whether we name it advantages or the points of importance, both are same here. Okay, so let's understand